Welcome to OmniPixel. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good night. Annie, thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate you. It's good to see Kaj and Karate and Baktai just got here, so I can easily pretend that they have. That is fantastic. I just talked for 5 minutes while being muted. I think you all could hear poor Carson trying to respond to me. And you're here, yeah. And so is
probably slightly confusing.
You got a handsome man. That happens a lot. I don't know if you've noticed that. I've had kind of this series of handsome men on this stream. I don't know. I did figure out the other day, I did work with someone and I was like, oh, right, she, her, excellent. And that is awesome. So welcome to the stream.
Hello,
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We were going to have a rave as evidenced by our first little, but we decided that we should probably actually just talk about things because I'm a little past rave days.
Yeah, I'm a little too tired for my rave tonight. TBH.
Yeah. So this is Carson, for those who don't know, in OmniPixel Discord. Carcinogens, but Carson. And so I was talking to him the other day, and Carson makes music, which is really exciting to me. Get this guy some bits. Are you guys hearing that? Probably.
Just a few musics here and there.
Just a little
every
bit
once
of
in a while.
musics.
I've heard the word music before.
That is good. That is good news.
One time I strummed the strings on a guitar. That was pretty nice.
Ooh, a little stairway.
Yeah.
I will be honest.
Stairway allowed.
I took music lessons for like a hot minute when I was a teenager, and I did learn how to play stairway, but it was the 80s, so
you kind of had to learn at that point.
You did. It was like a thing. So, I mean, just so you guys, I mean, you all know Carson from if you're part of the OmniPixel community. He's kind of that fun-loving late night gamer. But I asked him a little bit about who he was, and he called himself an electronic producer, composer, and classically trained cellist. So I was like, ooh, Carson, I'm going to tell them all about that. But I was curious, like, how did you get started in music? Obviously, not playing stairway.
Not quite. No. No. Actually, the first, like, I guess the first instrument I really played was the cello. And there was a music program that I started when I first got here. It was like 3rd grade or something. So I had to have been, 8 or 9 or something. And they showed us all about string instruments. And then I think once I was in 5th grade, we got to kind of actually do a string program. And I guess my mom eventually, she was like, apparently I wanted to get a violin. My mom was like, oh no, Carter, you don't want the violin. You want the cello. And lo and behold, I can still hold a tune every once in a while.
So violin, and your mom thought cello. Your mom thought, yeah he's going to carry the giant case around.
It made me strong.
I have to tell you, my son was in band, and that was like a thing among parents. Are you going to let them take whatever giant instrument that all 7th graders want to take? There's this whole conversation, and my son's like, I like playing the flute. And I'm like, done. So
easy.
I love it that your mom was like, no, that one.
Yeah. I'm actually really grateful because I ended up, and I might now be biased because of it, but I ended up loving the cello far more than any other instrument in the string orchestra. I find it to be the most, not necessarily expressive, but I guess the range of sound that it can produce is just a lot more appealing to me than some of the other instruments.
That makes a lot of sense. So how long did you focus on cello for quite a bit of time?
Yeah, I played all through high school, and then you know, I joined the Navy when I was like 18 and hadn't played it for a few years, and then I picked it up recently within the last few years, and then yeah. So it was like I guess I was playing since I was 10-ish, and I'm 25 now, so
Yeah, that's
it's
a long
been a
time.
minute.
Well,
I mean, there was a few years where I wasn't playing, but
mm-hmm.
we'll
Half
just
your
forget
life.
about those.
Just forget about that's a whole nother show.
Pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. I get that. But you kind of, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about piano, maybe a little guitar, maybe you can sing. Like, when did you start branching out a little bit?
Really within the last few years. So guitar and piano are very new for me. But when I decided that, I wanted to actually be a producer, a composer, I really got into learning music theory and all about sound, everything I can about music, just any little snippet of information, any like way to describe the philosophy of music. I was watching it, listening to it, reading it for the last few years. Pretty much since I just decided, I was like, hey, I'm not happy, trying to go through cybersecurity stuff, and I wanted music to be my choice. So
It makes a lot of sense. It sounds like it's a real passion. Anyone in chat play an instrument? I told you I took guitar lessons, but the reality is that lasts about 10 minutes. I have very small hands, and I was like, this hurts, and I'm done.
Guitar is not easy to start with. Your hands get so callous to start with.
Yeah, I just wasn't prepared for that. You play plastic guitar. Is it hooked up to the computer? Maybe a Wii?
He plays like Clone Hero. I know that.
I was thinking Rockstar or Guitar Hero.
It's pretty much the same thing, yeah. Clone Hero. It's like a reproduction. It's the totally legit original version of Guitar Hero.
Mm-hmm. I actually played saxophone in band during school. And that's not that long ago for y'all. Like, I mean, people my age, you talk about the instruments they play in school, and I'm like, okay. Yes, honey, that's half your life ago. Don't worry about it. So, I mean, I've often wondered when someone's been sticking with it as long as you have. Did you always love it, or were there times where it was like sometimes when you're younger, it's like, I don't know if I really want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I definitely think maybe through middle school, I was kind of like not super interested for maybe a year or so, but even then, I loved to play the cello. I thought it was awesome. I wasn't really, I loved music at the time too, but it was like the classic, like 2000, like alternative rock kind of scene. So like the Killers and a whole bunch of other people like that. So other than the cello, I hadn't really like educated myself on other genres of music that much, other than like alternative rock, because that's just kind of what I was introduced to through my parents. But I suppose that my taste developed as I played in orchestras more, and actually like classical music has a special place in my heart just because of that. And I think it's really I don't know. To me, it's just very special. Yeah. And even since then, obviously, my music tastes have evolved and developed in ways that I never would have thought a long time ago. I think that, especially with the type of music we have nowadays.
I think so. And with gamers and gaming culture and just the way games have evolved, I could tell you that I played the original NES back in the day, right? Do. That music gets very old very quick. And so you turn it all the way down because it drives you a little crazy. But music has evolved with the rest of gaming. And so I do see a lot of people interested in classical music, and they're kind of immersed in it sometimes. Like when you're playing a good game, you're kind of in that music. So, and there's a lot more kind of classical scores type stuff happening in video game than the good old electronic beat bloop bloop.
Yeah, that's also like a big part of my musical, like, I guess, upbringing is video games. You know, the first time I played a video game, I was like 5 years old. My dad was a big gamer, way before I was, so he introduced me to it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, there's so many games that have such incredible scores, that really kind of influenced not only the way that I just write, but also just kind of approach listening to music.
So I get that. So at some point, there's been a bit of a shift from cello to a more electronic kind of music production. What inspired that? Whoa.
Oh gosh, you know, there's not really like one thing I can point to as far as like how my taste for, you know, synths and stuff developed. I think it was just kind of more natural as that kind of music was introduced to like the musical lexicons of the gaming industry. I think it really just solidified that there's more than just, you know, the instruments that we can have at any point, you know, tubas, other brass, woodwind instruments, string instruments. We have all sorts of new instruments that you can kind of create yourself and create a whole new palette of color to work with. And that to me is really what kind of drives my love behind synths and actually like sound design itself is getting to place your sound within the palette of what you're trying to express, like the color palette of sound.
Right. Sounds like you treat it a little bit like oil painting.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. There's a lot of room for that, because it kind of goes along with the mixing process, which is, you know, you take time to actually fit everything within the soundscape in a place where it feels natural and doesn't overpower anything else, fits within the rest of the elements. And that's mixing. And so you do kind of treat that like you're painting colors on like a color palette, because you have a whole soundscape, and each sound that you have like for a specific element is going to have its own like range of frequencies that you're going to kind of hear, and we'll just call that, you know, the color of the sound. Whether has a lot of lower frequencies, it might be a bit darker, and has a lot of higher frequencies, might be a bit brighter. So it really is like a painting. You want everything to kind of fit congruently, you know,
and layer. That makes a lot of sense. So at what point did you think, oh, I really like this kind of music, I'm going to try making it?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I think one day it was just kind of almost like an epiphany moment where I had heard about music production. You know, there were some YouTubers that I watched that were into music production. You know, I knew like a lot of composers by name, just because I was like, oh, well, I love the music from this game, so I'm just going to listen to the soundtrack. And I was like, oh, I know that name. They've done all these other games that I like. So I think it was definitely more of an epiphany moment where I was kind of fed up with wanting to do anything related with cybersecurity. And I've loved music my whole life. I sing, I can play, you know, instruments to a functional degree at least. And, you know, I really love sound in general and music. So it was kind of a no-brainer to me. I was like, why not try? You know, it might be fun. It might be fun.
I mean, most of y'all have been here before and know that I think that that's a really important part of art in general is like, just do it. Some of it will be great and some of it won't be, and that's okay. I mean, use that flex that creative muscle and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely like, there's definitely days you have on, days you have off where you're like, oh, well, today I feel a lot more apt to want to actually like sit down and write something new. But you might have other days where you're not in a writing mood and you could be like, oh, well, maybe I'll just take this time to try to kind of premix some of the elements you have in your song. And it's all a matter of where you are in the moment, you know?
And not all of us find we're as talented as yourself, but that's okay too. So what kind of equipment did you start with? I always love to hear this because it's usually pretty humble.
Oh gosh. At first I had just my computer keyboard and my mouse. So nothing. Right. Zero. Some gaming headphones and some software, and that was it.
Yeah.
Since then, like my arsenal is not super crazy compared to some producers that I've seen, but now I have a keyboard here on my left. It's just an Arturia keyboard. Just you can modulate a whole bunch of functions with whatever you're trying to do with your sound or your digital audio workstation. And I'm kind of tucking behind the mic. So it's just a keyboard. Yeah. And then I have this one was my big purchase. This is a ASM Hydrosynth keyboard. It is I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the word.
That's okay.
It's like part digital and it's part analog. So it's a digital synth with like an analog, I guess, outboard, really.
Does this look like what I would have called a synth in the 80s?
For my face. Kinda, yeah. You have all of your special knobs for modulating certain parameters, just like you would for that stuff.
Flock of Seagulls was banging on in their video. Has a bunch of buttons at the top.
The really cool thing I like about this one, though, is the wavetable that's included with it, which is a wavetable is basically like, it's the type of wave that's being output every time you press a key. So every like oscillation, I guess I should say,
shapes, right?
Yeah. There's triangle waves, saw waves, square waves, sine waves, and there's a whole bunch of other, different types of waves that other people have classified. But those four are really like your main ones, especially from like the 70s and 80s when synth music was getting really popular. But the wavetable here, there's a lot of really cool options that you can scroll through, and there's just so many different types of sounds and so many different types of ways you can create a unique sound just at the press of a key.
So do you feel like your early experience with kind of that physical music production or physical music creation has influenced how you do your digital work now or your digital work now?
Yeah, I would definitely say I guess it instilled in me like a musicality that's super natural that, not everyone can necessarily, I guess it could be learned, but it's, sometimes you just, whether or not something fits in a place or, where the next note needs to be, or, like how to harmonize this. Just even without knowing any functional, like if I didn't know any music theory, I could still reproduce the same things I do, just a lot slower.
Right.
It's all up here.
Absolutely. It's all right with you. We're going to play a little bit of Spooky Strings now.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, this is one of Carson's productions from this year. Well, not 2021, but from the last year. So let's just switch so y'all can hear it. You can see his very locked page. And
it'll go public eventually.
Let's just give it a listen a little bit. Ooh, it's playing really low. Give me a second.
No, I think it's just the entrance is just super quiet.
Okay. You guys can hear that okay? Turn up my own. I don't have to turn up everything. So when I heard this, and we're going to talk a little bit, which is maybe a little bit rude to your music, but I was surprised by how classical it sounded. And so what inspired a piece like this?
I kind of, there was a time that I was kind of doing like an accountability program with the friend, and we were kind of like giving each other prompts to work with. And my prompt was something ambient and creepy. And so this is what came out of that.
It sounds like it's waiting for something. Like there's something going to happen any second now. It takes a little while, but that's the feeling it gets. I know that you said it's really important. It's really important to you that music reflects different moods and things like that. And so I think it's interesting that this one was particularly attached to a prompt that was really related to that.
Yeah. And to me, it was like, I wanted to write something just for the strings too. So this was kind of my solution, I guess. It was just something keeps you a little on edge, but it's a little sad, it has a twinge of sadness. Something's a little wrong, something's a little off.
Absolutely. And it's getting bigger here. Probably people can hear it really well now. All right, it's a pretty long piece, so maybe we'll leave it right there. We'll head back this way. So your current equipment, you talked a little bit about the physical equipment, but there's way more that goes into this than the physical synths that you have in front of you, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of software that goes into the production of music, and there's just you have a lot of websites you visit for samples, and there's a lot of moving pieces. In other words, it's not just as simple as what's in front of you.
So if someone were to get started, where would you tell them to start?
Your first thing is going to be getting a DAW, or a digital audio workstation, a DAW. There's some free ones like GarageBand. I think Apple Music has one. There's one called Pro Tools. That's a bit more expensive. I use Ableton. It is a bit more pricey as well. But I found Ableton is really good for electronic production, just because of kind of the way that I really like the way that the automation is kind of set up. And to be fair, I've never really used any other DAWs, but to me, Ableton, once you get through the learning curve of knowing where everything is, knowing what everything is, it feels really natural, and it feels like a workspace that kind of is tailored for the production scene, which it is, but it feels good. It feels good. I'm a big fan. So DAW is where you need to start. Right. From there, you can make everything you want. You don't need a single piece of equipment after that if you really don't want to. It just depends on your own monetary functionality, because there's definitely things you can get for physical hardware that's going to make you sound better, but won't help with your actual production style or your workflow or anything like that.
Yeah, learning's an important process. Sometimes it takes a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed there's a real strings influence. And you were talking about the sound libraries. And so if I was to go into a sound library right now, what does that look like? Is there literally a million sounds in there? Is it
No, I mean, so I guess some of them are. It's kind of depend on the kind of pack that you're getting. But when I'm talking about like sample libraries, for like say a string orchestra, what they do is they go and they will individually sample, like record live recordings of string players playing different notes, different articulations for different notes, and kind of put that all together in a software interface that makes it easy to just kind of play the orchestra, I guess. Play the strings. So it's real recordings of real instruments brought onto a digital space that you now can lay in front of you on your favorite keyboard, or your computer keyboard, whatever you happen to be using.
Fantastic. So this is actually a little different than I expected it to be honest, because basically you have to. It's not little collections of notes. You're putting together each note.
I mean, yeah, it's so the sample libraries that I've worked with are very like user friendly. All you really have to do is say, I had like a string ensemble library. I could click a little drop down box and it has my 4 different instruments in front of me for the ensemble: basses, cellos, violins, violas, or a string ensemble. And from there, you just drag it into the play slot. And then from there, if I wanted to just play right on my keyboards, you would already be playing the orchestra per se.
That's fascinating.
And from there, it gives you a whole host of like different articulations you could play, whether you want to do runs or like you want to be able to crescendo or do some like sforzandos for some brass instruments, stuff like that. And that's really going to depend on your library, the stuff that you have available to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you can start small, try it out, fool around with it for a while, see if it's something you want to invest in. Because some of the things you're talking about now are not inexpensive.
Nope, not. It is definitely, you definitely have to buy into it. And there is a steep money curve there. So there are a lot of options available for lower prices that are pretty good and are functional. And if you really wanted to get started and you wanted to work on really small things, super indie games that their main focus isn't going to be on you recording a whole live orchestra, you could just put together something small that's inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just going to be situational for whatever gig you're doing, I guess.
Absolutely. And just learning, enjoying it. I understand kind of pre-pandemic that you had some work in a professional setting.
Yeah. I worked at a studio that's kind of local to me. And I wasn't paid. I was just an intern, just kind of come in, hang out, help out, and learn. Get your chance to learn from professionals as they mix and as they write and stuff. And I did that for, I want to say maybe almost a year, maybe like 9 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, COVID happened and there's just a lot that happened behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
It wasn't really going to be the workout. It was destined to be, but I learned a lot there.
That's a really important thing. I think that people sometimes are so worried about getting their dream job that they're not, thinking about, okay, this is a stepping stone and this is something I can learn a lot from, and then I can take it to the next position that might even be a little closer to what I want to do in my life.
Yeah, it was definitely a good opportunity to be sure, because it really kind of gives you an inside view on how everything works. At least on like the production side, I worked at a studio that was very predominantly like hip hop and rap scene. So I got to know a lot of the people there, the artists, all the engineers there. It was really
That's a bit of a different sound than we just heard. But the principles are similar, right?
Yeah, and actually, you know, for songs that I actually use percussion in, I will say a lot of my influences from hip hop, just the percussion I use, and it's that definitely kind of infiltrates. You have a different like level of maybe like pop or hip hop influence that kind of infiltrates your classical composition or like just whatever you're working on, because you can really blend a lot of really cool music genres together and create something new. And it's yours, you know, it's your style, your influence, something that people recognize you by.
I love that. It's very different. It's a very, for me, a very new way of looking at it, for sure. Any kind of tips that you picked up there that maybe you should share with people or could share with people? You worked long and hard to earn it, but.
Oh gosh. No, I really got nothing for there.
That's okay.
I mean, I got stuff from there, but nothing that would like translate into like a
quick tip,
a life tip kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. Sometimes that is the case. Something that are really specific to a genre. So if it's if it's all right with you, I think I'm going to take a quick break and grab a drink of water, and then when we come back. We're going to talk a little bit about layering and some bigger pieces. We have some bigger sounds coming up than the one we played for y'all just a little while ago. And we'll talk a little bit about how the music comes together for real. Like, what does this mean? And right. Maybe where you dream about going, Carson. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back in just a few.
All right. See y'all then.
Welcome back. I spent all day at work telling people they're muted. You think, but no, I still got to do it.
That's why I'm here. That's the only reason I'm here, actually. She really wanted just someone to make sure she was not muted the whole time, and I volunteered.
Carson is so amazing. Did you hear how sweet he is? It's just going to make sure that Tree Rug doesn't ramble to herself for too long without someone saying something about, muted. So for those who are just coming back, you can catch the first part on YouTube, and the next couple of weeks it'll be out. Our YouTube channel, OmniPixel Gaming, can someone pull... Oh, it went up there just a second ago. A little while ago they showed up. We are trying to get some followers. So our excitement around being able to, once you get 100 followers, then you get or 100 subscribers, sorry, you get a whole different a whole different set of tools at your disposal. So we're looking at that. We're really excited about it. And I'm really excited to not have streams disappear forever once they're done, which is a new thought for me. Sad. It's a little weird, actually, how you can have these streams and they're fantastic, or they're really powerful, or they're just goofy. And unless like little clips, or unless someone highlights them, they're just gone in a couple of weeks. It's very interesting. A very interesting process. We were talking to Carson a little bit about his background in music, and how he came to be working in the digital music production area, and some of his hobbies and passions around that. And I was just going to ask him a little bit more about how layering works. What does this really look like? I'm imagining, you talked earlier about painting. So I'm imagining, like when you're oil painting, I've seen people oil paint. I don't oil paint. People put on color and then they move it around, then they add some more on top, and it creates a different shape and a different color than when they started with it.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think there's actually a good kind of similarity to be drawn there with painting, because you think about every time you're right, slap a layer of oil on this person that you're painting, something new comes about from how that looks, and it gives you a new perspective on how that looks. In the same way with how you do it with sound. You could have one element in mind, like one horn or just one drum, and you can actually take that element and you can split it up into multiple tracks and use different layers of audio to produce a whole like congruent sound. Kind of like you would use layers of paint on your canvas to draw a whole person. You have a whole sound after you finish your layers, and layering is really important because it can really define the way, or like, I guess, what your sound is trying to convey, whether it's dark or bright, like we talked about color palettes before, and really just kind of how it makes it stand out from the rest of the piece and how it fits in the mix. That's all going to be determined by your layering. If you can get a nice congruent sound by layering the right sounds together, you're going to be able to mix that a lot better, and it'll all come together at the end.
And I'm imagining it's a little bit, again, I'm going to use the oil painting analogy because I think it works really well based on your analogy of color palette. If you try and look too closely at one little bit of it, it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes all by itself. And you can't really tease out the individual elements anymore.
Right. You kind of have to be able to listen to it within context of everything else, your individual layer. And that's kind of how important that is it really gives kind of context to the rest of the piece. You have little pieces of ear candy here or there, and just something to perk your ears up, different layers of different sounds on top of each other to produce something new and something your own.
Absolutely. And do you ever add your own sound clips? You were telling me that you have a cello, you play a little piano, you sing a little bit. Do you ever add any of your own stuff in there?
Yeah, actually in an upcoming song that we'll be listening to, there's some background vocals that I did all myself. So that is me. That's me recording right through this mic right here. And you'll get a chance to see how I layer all these voices together, and I'll kind of point it out to you once we actually get to listen to it.
Let's do it. This is the piece, yes?
Mm-hmm, it is.
Excellent. I cannot say that name, but you can.
Kaja Shunera. It's nothing particular. It's just kind of, I guess you'll get to hear it.
All right.
Why it's called that.
Not up next. Play it now. This one you've added some definite different elements than the last one we listened to.
Mm-hmm.
The last one, to someone untrained like me, sounded 100% like strings.
Yeah, there's actually a cello and a viola playing that lead part, and then there's kind of a small choir of vocals in the background.
The vocals are very subtle. I don't hear them as vocals. Unless it's a stereo thing.
Yeah, it might be.
So when you get in here, and you... I should give this a second. Boom. Done. All right. So what goes into a piece like that?
Well, even just the beginning part, yeah, it's like I had this idea with just this little viola motif, and I kind of ran from there. That those first four notes, I mean, that's the first thing I had, and I ran the whole rest of the way with the song from there. There was I think 8 channels of vocals in that beginning, like half of the song, kind of layered on top of each other to produce different sonic qualities because there's different articulations that I'm actually doing with my own voice, whether they be oohs or ees, ahs. Those all have a very distinct sound when you're actually singing them, and can provide a different kind of texture within the soundscape that they're actually residing in. And so there's like 8 different channels of voices in there, all kind of doing their own thing, and they all go their own direction. That's the biggest thing I think with the way I write, is that every line is kind of written separately together with everything else. So it has to fit well on its own, but then be kind of fit together with all the other elements. It has its own voice. It has to make sense on where it wants to go and how it wants to go, on your infinite scale of notes.
Right. And then when you're layering them and things, do you end up shaping them? Do you end up changing how they sound as you fit them together?
Yeah, actually, there's something called EQing, which is equalizing. You're going to be basically taking certain frequencies from your entire spectrum of that sound, either going to be boosting them, you're going to kind of be like ducking them a little bit in that frequency range, and that can also kind of help shape the way your things are going to sound, whether you want to actually take that sound and make it brighter or you want to make it darker. In that context, if you wanted to make it darker, you would cut out all your high frequencies and kind of give your mids and lows a little boost. And yeah, it all has to do with that color palette that we talked about.
And so you have one voice singing on there about 8 times to layer it and make it all make sense together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's like me doing a whole bunch of different articulations to create like a whole painting. So actually, if you wanted to play even that first just 20 seconds and anyone wanted to listen to that and kind of pick apart the different types of vocals I have in there, you can hear the oohs and ees. They're subtle, but they're placed right behind your instruments on purpose.
Right. Do you start with that idea?
As far as having the vocals in there?
Yeah.
Nope, that was something that was put in there later. Actually, it was more of a later decision. But I even have like the vocals kind of pumping in and out to kind of have the listener kind of anticipating something.
Right. Maybe we can keep letting it play. But yeah, that's interesting to me that you started with the viola in this one, and yet it's such a I'm not going to say full sounding piece because I'm sure your pieces are very full, but a very diverse sounding piece with a lot going on in it.
Yeah, all the other sounds in it, I put together just through different digital synths that I have. So there's a big horn in the beginning. You have that little kind of faint plucky sound in there. It has that little bright twinge kind of with it. And then you have like your kind of drone that you hear kind of come in right before they start chanting.
So how many different components might go into something like that? That's a 1 minute and 30-second piece, maybe?
Well, actually, let me pull up my project file and I can actually tell you exactly how many tracks are loaded in this. And your tracks are going to be your individual like sound bites or your individual VST or synth, whatever it
Elements?
might be. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to me.
But I think for this one, I had so many layers of voices, and like there's a lot you have to do with even just the strings to kind of layer them, give them a more full sound than what they would be originally. But there's 64 tracks.
Wow.
So there's 64 elements in that like minute and a half to produce that whole track. And you wouldn't really think of it, right? Because it all kind of fits, I guess.
To someone who doesn't know, it definitely is surprising. What is your dream for your music?
I would really love to be able to kind of be a freelance composer for video games, just because I'm a big gamer myself. I grew up in the video game music, and just it really influenced what I listened to, what I enjoyed. Actually, I still even listen to soundtracks just by itself all the time. Something about thematic game writing is really, really pleasing to me. So,
what are some of your favorites?
Someone like Marty O'Donnell, he wrote all the tracks for Halo. Very famous, obviously. Some more recent ones are the Breath of the Wild soundtrack. I actually don't know who the composer is for that. I'd have to look it up. But there's also, I don't know if you've heard of the game, Horizon Zero Dawn. It was a PlayStation exclusive for a while, and then moved to PC. But the Horizon Zero Dawn is one that really stood out because that game has an incredibly story-rich environment, and the soundtrack it's perfect for it. It really is. You really get the sense of everything you're doing in that universe, and even like something that they like to do. Game composers might be introducing something like a leitmotif, which is basically like just kind of a recurrent theme throughout a song that kind of gives you the picture of a someone, a someplace, or like a something, and so it's like used specifically when a certain character or a place comes into scene, and it can really help tie a soundtrack together, because when you're first introduced to the character, you might be played their original theme, like in Horizon Zero Dawn. Aloy, the main character, has her own theme, and that theme actually is used in so many of the other songs throughout the game. And it kind of, as her own personal story develops, so does the theme that develops with it. It kind of, yeah. And so they actually expand upon the theme and give it new voicings of different chords, and they have different instrumentations of the theme just to fit whatever it might be, and it develops along with the story. And that's something that I've understood to be one of the most important things for especially a super narrative driven game. As the narrative develops, you want your music to develop with it, and kind of give the player a sense that they're really enveloped within the scene, because good music can make or break a game, truly.
I think that's, I'm going to relate this a little bit to movies, because that's where I watch video games. I don't usually play them. And usually when I watch them, I don't end up watching a whole playthrough. So I'd never noticed that. I've seen Horizon Dawn for sure before. And it's a beautiful game, and it's got some neat story elements that I've seen. Some really, but that immersive quality, right? That ability to kind of pull you in and feel congruent. I know sometimes music is, I find maybe on Twitch I've noticed, or in this kind of community, I've noticed people appreciating music more than probably my generation did in those contexts. I remember my son being a little kid watching TV, and he goes, something bad's gonna happen. I was like, how do you know? He's like, the music. He's like 3-4 years old, right? And you're like, oh yeah,
the music tells all. You're right. Really does.
And he's just like this.
I think it's really cool because it's, my own personal opinion is that music is really a way that we kind of connect with our own emotions. And so a good piece can really set the emotional feel for a scene or a place, a time, a thing. And really, it really does draw you in, right? It's part of the story. The music is just as much as part of the story as the actual story itself, the writing, the voice acting, the narrative, all that stuff.
Yeah. When you told me about Leitmotif, the first thing that came to mind was the Imperial March, Darth Vader.
Yeah, actually, and you'll hear that theme actually used in quite a few, even smaller pieces in that series. The dun 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 dun. Yeah. That can be, those notes right there can be recontextualized in an infinite number of ways, and give you a new way to approach listening or viewing a scene or whatever,
and give you that feeling like things belong in a certain place in the universe, right? It feels congruent, because I suspect that you notice that more than I do, especially as the series have moved on and all those kind of things. But for us, yeah, it definitely was the first time we really like connected so strongly. So I mean, everyone knows you just did the whole thing, and that movie was, is 45 years old now, 43 years old, whatever the first one is.
Yeah. And everyone can say that that's Darth Vader's theme. Like that, it goes for Darth Vader, right?
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
Every time you think of him, that's the theme.
Yep. Exactly.
So that's when I say it's like a good theme, a good motif can make or break and how you evolve that motif. Even Luke, the Skywalkers have their own theme. It's the Skywalker theme. It's da 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 da. That's the classic one that evolves so many times throughout the series, and you kind of do the same thing that he does with the Star Wars series in the game. You develop the theme with the narrative.
Yeah. And I think with video games, it probably matters. I'm not going to say more, but because the video games, I do feel they're much more immersive. I know other people believe that too, so I'm not just me. But as much as I'm not as immersed in the game world myself, I do understand it's a more immersive experience. So it's more important. It'll feel more discongruent, I think, if it's wrong or off.
Yeah, and you'll definitely get the sense of that, where if you're playing something and the music isn't quite doing it for you, and the game's just not quite doing it for you, you're kind of left with a sour taste in your mouth. So it really is important, even if it's like simple production, and even if it's just like 8-bit music, it changes everything. It really is it adds to everything.
I will tell you that I used to, before I was on Twitch, and I do game now that I'm on Twitch, I used to play a lot of little simple like PopCap games. Y'all might not even know what those are, but think about like Plants vs. Zombies. And yeah, I love that stuff. I used to play it with the sound off. It was a whole new world for me, putting the sound on, putting an earbud in my ear so I could hear alerts, right? And actually playing those games. And some of it was good, and some of it was just like, I wanted to gouge my eyeballs out by the end. Like I was like, oh, I can't stand this music anymore. And there's lots of kind of smaller games like that where we've loved the game, and we've been like, we recently played Pikuniku, cute little platformer thing, little indie. It was really cute. And the music was good. However, it was exceedingly repetitive. And if I was taking a while because I'm a little slow, man, was I ready to get out of there. I was like, it's like punishing me for taking too long in this area. So I started to understand kind of the importance of music. I'd always I do understand it beyond them, but just the way it can be incongruent or not really work well, definitely hit me. About then.
And the thing I like a lot about the way music is kind of inserted into a place is it can really like even shape your understanding of the scenes that's going on, like what you're supposed to feel. And it gives you like kind of, you know, that definition that your heart's supposed to find.
And I think that's especially important when there's not always acting happening. Sometimes words are written on a screen, right? And so as a writer, I know that those words can be really hard to attach emotion to. I often have to attach a physical presence to them. And even then, it's like you're sending it to other people. Do you feel what this character's feeling? What do you think? Is that sarcasm or is it real? Like, how do you tell? Yeah. And so music can help you with that, right? Like, is this a game? Two characters are chasing each other. Are we having fun or not?
Is it supposed to be fun or is it supposed to be dangerous? And that the music can tell you a whole lot of different things in that situation, you know?
Like my son said, something bad's going to happen. Right? And so, and I
context.
Watching Hollow Knight with a streamer, and you go into a room and it's like, they don't even have to they're like, what did I just walk into in this game? Right? And they're like, what's happening? Because the music changed when you change rooms. I've actually
seen like a few video synopsis on the Hollow Knight soundtrack and the leitmotifs used in that, and the solo viola to depict the Hollow Knight. It's really cool. The composer really put a lot of thought into how they presented the music behind the game and how even the themes developed there. Mm-hmm. And really shaped how you may perceive the ending of the game, which I won't spoil because, you know, there might be some people here who've not played all the way through.
I actually haven't seen the end. So that's an important part. But yeah, there's this kind of feeling that comes over you, like, is this fun or not? You have another piece that you were going to share with us today. It's a bit of I would call it a bigger piece. And so I thought we'd play it.
It's a little more energetic, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And by bigger, I mean the sound is bigger, maybe, not necessarily. So I thought we'd play it a little bit, and then I have some questions for you too.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do it. Starts off much different. This is the one I was bugging you about. Being a 90s kid, I instantly think about X-Files.
Yeah.
That's a very specific reference. Not a lot of people get. That's being nerdy in the 90s, people.
Yeah, I wanted this beginning part to feel a little more ethereal and a little less like structured than the rest of it. Mm-hmm.
So I can tell you where, like, what I think of this, but what inspired this piece? I keep playing.
You know, it actually was Horizon Zero Dawn, funnily enough. It was just kind of the narrative behind it. And kind of, without going too much into spoilers of the game, it was kind of the idea of humanity kind of being rebuilt from the ground up, and that's what you're kind of hearing right now. It's like the machines hammering away and actually like building people, you know, bringing us back after a catastrophe that we caused.
10 months ago, who knew we might need that? Damn it, Carson. I need to change that emote.
It's all my fault.
I
predicted it. No.
Dang it, anyway. No. So what kind of, I mean, I was feeling some serious ominousness at the beginning. And even when it kind of restarted again. And now it starts to feel like it's picking up energy instead. Was that kind of your intent?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, there was I think the one thing that I will actually comment on, just because I was a little disappointed at how it turned out, was just the mix on the drums. The drums are too far back in the mix for my own personal taste. It doesn't really give me it's supposed to kind of be a little more driving, I guess. But going back to layering, some of the percussion on this song, some of the drums, they're actually layered with like swooshes and flicks and like other different noises to kind of get them to transition more naturally into the next sound. And like one of the snares that I have is like, it goes, you have your bass, your kick drum, you go, but on top of the kick, you have and then you have on the snare. So it kind of like it kind of snaps you into the snare, like just swoop up into the snare and then right through it.
And that's something you create using your software.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just, you have your original drum sound along with whatever you want to layer on top of it. And I have like an anvil striking on top of that as well. So you're kind of getting that kind of literal transposition of the soundscape of the environment into your music.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It's got that industrial kind of feel to the background a little bit.
Yeah.
What is it that makes the sound that I told you sounded like X-Files?
Was it kind of like
it was the little ping 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 at the beginning?
That was just a small little synth I set up. I think it was just, nothing too crazy. Just a little pluck, just to kind of give it a different texture to kind of contrast the piano in it.
Yeah. Yeah. The piano definitely feels like the driving force behind that one.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you imagine?
It was what I started with.
Where do you imagine a piece like that might fit in a game?
Oh, well, when I was writing it, I didn't really have any idea. It's as I really started to write more, I kind of have been able to kind of contextualize a piece within a narrative that I saw fit at the time. So it's not really like, it's only something kind of abstract that I can kind of write for. But as I go forward, I'd like to actually go through, take some scenes from even like popular video games that I know, just take a clip, just kind of take the music out and write my own piece for it and kind of recontextualize that scene with my own music. That'll be something that I know will kind of help writing for it,
Absolutely. That's what I imagine.
Like
I can tell you what I imagined. And when you make me imagine something like that, that's actually a pretty, I'm going to say, impressive feat, because I don't visualize anything ever. I have aphantasia. So when I tell you that I'm imagining something that goes with music, it's a very cognitive process, but it's pretty impressive, because sometimes I'm a little bit flat with those things. But there's the classic scenes where a hero is defeated. Mm-hmm. Right? But then they're actually not. And they get back up.
They come back better than ever, yeah.
They come back and there's this struggle. And the first part is the doom, right? And then when you hit that kind of, it's a smaller part in the SoundCloud look. And then when you hit the kind of bigger part, that's when I'm imagining that moment of, no, I'm still here, damn it. So that's kind of what I was imagining. And
yeah, towards the end, it was definitely more of like well, this is it. They're back now. Power. And it's like, we're back now. And like, we're going to get working. Yeah. Humanity's going to try to pull itself back together. No matter how infeasible that is on a modern day scale.
We're going to save the world with music.
No, we can only hope,
that's a very serious thing. All right. I'm going to ask chat now. I see Bagams has joined us in Civics. I'm going to ask them if they have any questions for you or anything they want to add. Because that's an important part of this too. Sometimes people have thoughts and ideas and questions. But I really appreciated the variety in the music that you shared today too. Because It definitely shows. For those of us who aren't familiar with digital music creation, that's a lot of pressure. Right on you, Bagums. Total pressure on you. It shows the wide variety. For those of us who don't know about digital music production, we kind of tend to think it's a rave. Like that tends to be what we think of. And so it's really helpful for us to hear, the different range of what you're capable of with your keyboard and your voice.
Yeah. And I will say, I think a lot of my just influence of writing in general will always be 4-string orchestra. It's just string orchestra is super near and dear to my heart, and I think that's always going to be kind of a big part of how and what I actually use to write with. I mean, in all 3 of those pieces, there was actual string instruments in them. So
that's something interesting to hear too, because some of us tend to hear the predominant notes and just kind of miss the rest. We're standing back, we're looking at the oil painting, right? As opposed to looking a little bit closer.
And it's hard to know the artist's intention behind it, right? You kind of have to interpret what they were trying to say with their piece.
Or you do what I did and you just make up your own.
Or you do what you did and actually ask the author of the piece.
I do that too. As much as I can, I ask people what they think and do. But there's something to be said. I mean, this conversation is about to devolve into a conversation about art a little bit. But when you put your art out there in the world, people will hear it or see it, or in this case, definitely hear it, perceive it differently. And it might mean something to them that you didn't intend, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they're seeing something different than what you heard when you put it out there. And I can say that's the same with my writing too. People will pick up on small things that I intended to be really small things. And they I love this part. And I'm like, really? I was just filling a page.
Yeah, who would have known, right?
And they'll see
something
that as the important part.
You don't intend to be like the focal piece of something can end up being what draws people in. It's about experimentation, right?
And who appreciates it is very different than I expected. As a writer, it's a lot of older former military Americans, oddly enough, who write me and hey, I really like this. Oh, okay. So it just depends on who hears it and what they hear, and the same with reading. And it makes people nervous showing their artwork, but I think that we have to get comfortable. I'm gonna go, like I said, a little art lecture with people taking our work and kind of giving it their own meaning. And if you think about it, that's actually a really powerful thing. It means it's spoken to them enough to give it their own meaning.
To contextualize it in their own way. Yeah, I'll definitely agree. But Bagums, this was a big stretch even for me, coming on here and showing more people my music, because that's something, for someone who's only been even literally just writing music for 2 years, it's very daunting to take what you've written or like what you've drawn in your case and kind of get other people's opinions on it, because you're kind of always scared about what other people are going to think. But then you have to, kind of love your own art for that way. But
there's a very fine line between accepting critique and growing from it and letting it get to you or letting it completely change who you are as an artist. So there's this where you have to almost have like a screen, right? Like a screen lets things in, but it also keeps things out. And so you have to choose what you kind of let through your screen, right? Like actually that's a really good critique. I'll take that in mind. Or that's not what I meant, and that's okay, but I'm not probably the person who's going to be, in my case, writing for you. That's just not my writing. You can say that, but it's just not my thing. I write a lot in first person present tense, which some people hate. And I'm like, too bad. I like that. Right.
And it's all about preference, right? And that's your perspective on the story too. So
the same with music is if people do give you critiques or do suggest things, I mean, some of it you'll be like, oh yeah, that'll help me grow. And other things you'll be like,
sometimes you'll be hurt. You'll be like, I'm going to have to not let that one get to me.
Or you'll say, that's actually not how I want to make my music. That's your opinion and your music. And that's not how I want to do it. So go away.
And that's actually something I said to one of my friends recently, because he actually was kind of, I showed him that piece Caja Tronera, and he was critiquing some things about it, and I was actually like, oh, well, that was actually what I intended. That was supposed to fit there that specific way on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it was written that way very intentionally.
Zivix is
There's something I was trying to evoke.
His artist wrote a song on substance abuse. And when he heard it, interpreted his song about anxiety, which wasn't far off. But yeah, like, and we use our own lens when we're looking at it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes some people's lenses just won't match yours. And you're like, no, well, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Is that Joji, Ziv? Are you talking about Joji? I feel like you are. Because he has a lot of really interesting songs about,
Eden.
Really? Eden. Okay. Yeah, he has a lot of interesting songs about kind of his own personal development. So I thought that may have been where you got that from.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have any last thoughts? Anything we haven't talked about yet that we should dive into?
No, I'll say it was a pleasure being on the show and being in front of all these lovely people.
It was fantastic. I really appreciate you doing this. And I'm really, really glad that you did open up and share with us. And I hope that it'll encourage you to keep going. If you want to find Carson, you can't. No.
My social is very limited. I will say that. That's true.
What we did decide is you can come find him on our Discord, OmniPixel. So you're gonna have to join OmniPixel stuff.
And as I write more, there's probably stuff that I'll be leaking to the Discord as well, and some of our creative chats. But that'll be something you have to see for yourself.
Yeah, tune in. We're just wrapping up Poke. We were just talking to Carson about video games and music production and all those interesting things that is a topic I hadn't really considered before being part of Twitch. So I really appreciate kind of that education myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about it. I love talking about sound, music, all that stuff. Just when you love something, you love to talk about it,
Absolutely.